Mehdi. Ali Mehdi is Mumbai. Oh, you got?
Do we have to go over there? Do we have to go over there?
No, we are reciting Yasin first.
You're gonna say here or there?
And then here we recite Yasin, and then we go there. What's your brother's name? Mehdi, right?
Yeah.
Ali Mehdi, Mehdi Ali.
Mahdi is not.
I can't, it's such a big name. It's gotta be. Yeah, because right now, when we're done, we have to wait for 10, 12 minutes, 15 minutes for the Yeah, but yeah, but Mashallah doesn't show the now we're deciding Mashallah here yet. Tell her to put the speakers on it, because the mics are off. It's off mic. Hey, it's off. Good.
Assalamu alaikum. Huh? Wait, here or there? Mason. Mason, here or there?
Here.
Wait, Mason, there's no one here yet. We can just
Start working, right? Is it hooked up? Oh, how is it going to hook up?
No, it's
Look,
not on.
my friend,
I thought you
look, you're from the IT department,
I
right?
wasn't looking.
And you don't, you have to check.
I didn't.
Okay.
do IT person.
I think
You're doing IT, right?
I think we should wait for like.
No.
I think we should wait for like 10 minutes.
is better like this. Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مكمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم. إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما كذبوا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب عليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزل على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم أرض الميتة وأحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملت أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلك منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متقئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أحد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد عدل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لتمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فعنا يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسقناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكس في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه شعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم أولم يرى أولم يرى الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقا قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون اللهم صل على محمد سورة الفاتحة
Assalamu alaikum, brothers. We're having namaz over there. Jamaat namaz is over there, please.
Yeah, this is for this. I'm keeping it here. But it makes
Good to see you. I want to talk to your son. Is he here today? I want to tell you, we had a meeting this morning. We're so excited for having him. He's multilingual, right?
Actually, I think whether Murtaza Jamal spoke to
He
him.
spoke to him?
I think he spoke to him.
Because this topic came up this morning.
Yeah, and he declined that to do no. Yeah.
He's not come to him. Not yet. But he has to work towards it. Now you have to tell him. Look, the demand is there. Because what happens, a lot of our elderly people,
Yes.
they provide us feedback that they miss out a lot.
Of course, yes, yes.
And some are traditional.
Of course, yes. Of course, yes.
But if he's not comfortable yet, no.
Yeah, he declined that to do the
I want to
Murtaza.
talk to him.
Sure, sure.
I want to make sure really, as a youngster, unfortunately, the trend is not as it used to be.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم
Inshallah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله هو الله أكبر ولله الحمد الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا ولي الله أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا حجة الله. هيا على الصلاة، هيا على الصلاة، هيا على الفلاح، هيا على الفلاح، هيا على خير العمل، هيا على خير العمل. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله، لا إله إلا الله. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
الله أكبر، الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله، أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله، أشهد أن عليا ولي الله، أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح، حي على خير العمل، حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله وأسأله التوبة. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر، وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر. ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر. تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر. سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العلى وبحمده. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العلى وبحمده. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد، الله الصمد، لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك الرحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. وصلى الله على محمد وآل الطيبين الطاهرين. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله والحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والنجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنات والرضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد وآله السلام. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك لا إله إلا أنت. أستغفرك وأتوب إليك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله أستغفر الله وأسأل التوبة يا كريم يا لطيف الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانهر إن شانئك هو الأبتر الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد الله أكبر ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع الله لمن حمد الله أكبر سبحان ربي العلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان ربي العلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع الله لمن حمد الله أكبر سبحان ربي العلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف بحق محمد وآل الطاهرين الله أكبر بسم الله وبالله والحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم إنه ليس لي علم بموضع رزقي وإنما أطلبه بقطرات تخطو على قلبي فأجول في طلبه البلدان فأنا في معنى تعلم كالحيران لا أدري في سعل أم في جبل أم في أرض أم في سماء أم في بر أم في بحر وعلى يدي من قبل ما وقد علمت أن علمه عندك وأسبابه بيدك وأنت الذي تقسمه بلطفك وتسببه برحمتك اللهم صل على محمد وآله واجعل يا رب رزقك لي واسعا ومطلبه سهلا ومعقده غريبا ولا تؤنني بطلبي ما لم تقدر لي فيه رزقا فإنك غني عن عذابي وأنا فقير إلى رحمتك فصل على محمد وآل محمد وجد على عبدك بفضلك أنك ذو فضل عظيم
أحسنت
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد السلام عليك يا رسول الله يا نبي الله السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبي طالب السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيد النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي الشهيد بكربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم يا أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين زين العابدين ومحمد بن علي الباقر وجعفر بن محمد الصادق وموسى بن جعفر القاسم وعلي بن موسى الرضا ومحمد بن علي الجواد وعلي بن محمد الحادي وحسن بن علي العسكري ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا حجة بن الحسن يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم
بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات.
صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. جب ردا سر سے چھنی میں صدا دیتی رہی تو نہ آیا غازی جب ردا سر سے چھنی میں صدا دیتی رہی تو نہ آیا غازی آل عمران کہاں اور زندان کہاں یہ بہن قید ہوئی تو نہ آیا غازی جب ردا سر سے چھنی میں صدا دیتی رہی تو نہ آیا غازی اور ہم کو پانی نہ ملے تیری خوشبو تو رہے تیرے بازو نہ کٹے چاہے مشکی زاچ دے یہ مگر ہو نہ سکا تیرے بازو ہے جدا مجھ پہ ہے تشنال بھی تو نہ آیا غازی جب ردا سر سے چھنی میں صدا دیتی رہی تو نہ آیا غازی آ گئی شام علم لٹ گئے اہل حرم ریت پر جلتی ہوئی ہو گیا ٹھنڈا علم پرسہ دینے کے لیے مجھ سے ملنے کے لیے آ گئے بابا علی تو نہ آیا غازی کتنی بے بس تھی بہن اے شہنشاہ وفا نام لے لے کے میرا جب یہ ظالم نے کہا ناز تھا جس پہ تجھے اب بلاؤ نہ اسے اور میں روتی رہی تو نہ آیا غازی اور قید خانے میں قضا جب سکینہ کو ملی دیکھے کرتے کا دفن بچی دفنائی گئی اس گھری نام تیرا صورت ناد علی بس میں دہراتی رہی تو نہ آیا غازی جب ردا سر سے چھنی मैं सदा देती रही तू ना आया गाजी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि मुहम्मद व आले मुहम्मद
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل يا أيها الكافرون لا أعبد ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد لكم ولا أنا عابد ما عبدتم ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد لكم دينكم ولي دين.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. Tonight's Surah Yasin was recited for the following marhumin that are listed on the screen. Please recite Surah Fatiha for all marhumin. Al-Fatiha. Just two traffic-related announcements which are very important. The first one is management has noticed individuals parking in the handicapped spots without the appropriate decals. Please ensure you have the required stickers on your car before parking there. With Muharram approaching, they'll be stricter with the enforcement and tow trucks will be present. The second reminder is that our parking areas are only for one-way use, meaning you must enter from the men's entrance and leave from the ladies' entrance. Incorrect use can cause accidents, and so we urge you all to follow these rules. Lastly, let us recite the ayah of Amma Yujibu for all those brothers and sisters around the world who are in need of our prayers. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibu al-mudtarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. Amma yujibu al-mudtarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء اللهم صل على Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. With the loud salawat, let us introduce Sheikh Bilal and welcome him to the podium. Salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.
رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: وجعلنا منهم أئمة يهدون بأمرنا لما صبروا وكانوا بآياتنا يوقنون. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat as condolences to the master of our time, Sahibul Asri wa Zaman. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بذكرنا المسائب آل محمد. May Allah increase in our reward for commemorating the difficulties of the Ahlul Bayt, خصوصا the martyrdom of our ninth Imam Muhammad ibn Ali al-Jawad alayhi salam. Before we get into our topic of discussion, it's a contemporary issue, therefore it's worth mentioning. We're always in the process of establishing in our children the culture that they live by and the identity that they live by. Including ourselves, we have to pay attention to our identity. It's the most important thing that we have, that who are we? Who do we identify ourselves as? As such, tomorrow is Father's Day. On the American Gregorian calendar, Father's Day is a day of celebrating with your dad, acknowledging him, appreciating him, spending time with him. As fathers, you may not know, but children will be paying attention to this and typically do something special. It's a day of celebration. But in the question of identity, tomorrow for me as a Shia of Ahlul Bayt is a day of sadness. It's a day of the Shahadat of the Imam. So our children have to be educated and our families have to be educated that what do we identify as first? Do we identify as Americans? And whatever the American holiday is takes precedence in my life, that's the preference that I give to what I do? Or do I identify as a Shia? If my identity is with my faith and my identity and my ideology, then my character and my behavior has to demonstrate that identity. Meaning that tomorrow is not a day that I'm going to enjoy, because that day the precedence in my identity is being a Shia, and the sadness of Ahlul Bayt is my sadness. And it's not a day that I'm going to celebrate. It doesn't mean that I won't. Maybe next week I'll do it. Maybe Monday I'll do it. Maybe some other day I'll do it. We can have our time to celebrate Father's Day. It's a great thing. There's nothing wrong with it. As a matter of fact, I think we need more days like this. But tomorrow won't be that day, because I need to teach my children priority. I need to teach my family priority. We do not reflect the values of society. We reflect the values of Ahlul Bayt in our house. That's why we have the statement from the Ahlul Bayt: Shi'atuna yafrahuna bifarhina wa yahzanuna bihuznina. That to be a Shia means that you are happy in the times of the happiness of Ahlul Bayt, and you are sad in the times of the sadness of Ahlul Bayt. That's my priority. That's my definition. It's not intended as a criticism. It's not intended to ruin anyone's plans. But it's a conversation of identity. It's not simply a conflict of culture, that, oh, one culture says this, another culture says that, I'm American too, I can be an American. No. The question is identity of faith. That's how can these, when I have a contradiction between what my faith wants me to do and what my culture wants me to do, which do I give priority? So this is a point of teaching and of education. And as such, tonight's conversation around the personality of our Imam is a point of education and discussion. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Our ninth Imam is one who his father described and said, Ma kana yulidu fi din al-Islam wiladatun mutabarrakun akthar min hadha. There is no one who is born in the religion of Islam who was more bountiful, who had more barakah than this birth of the son of mine, Muhammad ibn Ali. This statement, coming from a ma'soom, you know when a ma'soom makes a statement, it can't have contradiction, it can't be a mistake. This statement of the Imam was a demonstration and was a statement that proved why and the necessity of the birth of this Imam for the Shia of throughout history. One, in the time of Imam Rida, the fact that he had no children until he was 48, the demonstration of him having a son was something that proved the lineage of Imamate through Imam Rida, and the people of time who were splitting into different factions, the Fatahiyya, the Waqifiyya, came back to Imam Rida and rejoined, and there is no split in Imamate after the Imamate of Imam Rida. So the presence of Imam Jawad kept all of the Shia of the time together. But it did more than that. The Imamate of Imam Jawad, if you look at the timeline of his life, his Imamate begins at the age of 8 years of age. Now, he's born in the year 195 after Hijrah. He spends time in the company of his father until 201 or 200 Hijrah, when Imam Rida is taken to Tus, which is about 5 or 6 years. And at the age of 6, he is separated from his father until the year of 2003, where he is 8 years of age, and Imam Rida becomes Shaheed. The Imamate of Imam al-Jawad begins at 8. This Imam in particular, and this is why, this Shahadat of this Imam, any Imam's Shahadat is not a light matter. But one of the most difficult things about the Shahadat of this Imam, we have no Imam who was martyred younger than Imam Jawad. Imam Jawad was made Shaheed at the age of 25. 25. That's it. 17 years he was the Imam, and he was martyred in that time. So for us, the Shia, for our Imam to be killed in his youth, we shouldn't treat it like a normal day. It shouldn't be something we're okay with. It's a great tragedy. It's a great loss. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This Imam's Imamate that begins at the age of 8, for the rest of the Shia throughout time, the beginning of an Imamate at the age of 8 was a demonstration of the divinity of the position of Imamate. You see, up until the time of Imam Rida, it could be argued and discussed that, for example, an Imam studies at the hands of his father, researches a lot of knowledge. They just happen to be a very intelligent young man who goes through and studies a lot of information, and then yes, it happens that he just happens to be, na'uzubillah, the most intelligent of the time, just happens to be. But when an 8-year-old steps forward and an 8-year-old becomes the Imam of the time, there is no explanation for how that 8-year-old handles and possesses this authority, except that it is a divinely appointed position. For the Shia, from the time of Imam Ali until the time of our Imam that is now, there has never been a demonstration before this of showing that Imamat's divine authority begins from the moment of birth, and it's demonstrated that an 8-year-old is greater in authority than the rest of humanity. So when Imam Rida makes a statement, there is no one born who is more mutabarrak in the religion of Islam than the son of mine, this son of his was a demonstration and the proof that if any Shia ever doubted that, do I really follow a divinely appointed leader? Or did it just happen that these were the most important or knowledgeable people of their time and we just chose the right knowledgeable person of their time? That no, that how could you compare that this child of 8 who is the Imam and the authority of Allah on this earth, that he happens by chance to be smarter than every man of his time, happens to be more noble and generous than any Imam and any person of his time. This was a demonstration of the divinity of the authority of Allah that is present in Ahlul Bayt. And our 8th Imam used to explain this, that when our 8th Imam was separated from Imam Jawad, and the year 2001 when he left, he appointed it, and the appointment of Imam al-Jawad was public. It was in front of everyone. When the Imam was being forced to leave the city of Medina, the people came and said, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, who is in charge of the family? Who is in charge of the mu'mineen in Medina? Who is the one that we should reach out to if we cannot get in contact with you? Who is the authority of Allah on this earth after you? That if we don't get to see you, how do we know where does Imamat go? Imam Rida openly said, this son of mine, Abu Ja'far. One of the other specialities of our 9th Imam is that even though he was a small child, Imam Rida always honored him with the dignity of referring to him by the title Abu Ja'far. He said, this son of mine, Abu Ja'far, is your Imam after me. And the people questioned. They said, him, he's a child. And Imam Rada replied and he says, Allah gave the authority to Isa at an age younger than my son. Then why should you doubt the authority of my son over you? Amongst the Anbiya, there are a variety of examples of Anbiya whose Nabuwwat was announced and began from young and early ages. Most prominent amongst them we know is Nabi Isa, who spoke from the cradle. قال إني عبد الله آتاني الكتاب وجعلني نبيا. From the cradle, Nabi Isa spoke and demonstrated the miracle of Nabuwwat, that it has the ability to be an authority on this earth from the moment of its inception. There are other examples amongst the Anbiya as well too. One of the examples that recently while studying came up, Nabi Saleh. Nabi Saleh began preaching to the people of Thamud when he was only of the age of 16. And he preached to them for over 100 years. But from the age of 16, he was preaching, and he was the representative of Allah on this earth, as well as other Anbiya who began their Nabuwwat from an early age. So Imam Rada says that Allah has established His authority on this earth from early ages. Why should you doubt that my son is the authority on this earth? And if I am telling you he's the authority, do you think I can make a mistake? So the demonstration and the authority of Imam Jawad was one of those things that was necessary to prove the fundamental, that this is a divinely placed authority, not a selected authority, not a coincidental authority. And it laid the path and firmed the aspect for our 10th Imam and for our 12th Imam, Sahib al-Asr wa zaman, Ajjalallahu ta'ala. Such that when our Imam's Imamat begins at the age of 5, there is no one amongst the Shia who can question or wants to question that how is it possible for the authority of Allah to be established in the age of 5. No, we saw it before, we understood it before, we know that the authority of Allah is from the moment that they are born, that they are the authority of Allah, and that their authority over humanity is not restricted by the age that we see them in. So when Imam Rada makes the statement that there is no one more mutabarrak born in this religion of Islam than my son, it was for this reason that till today, that if we were to question the authority of an Imam, that is it true, were they really divinely appointed? The proof and the demonstration of this divine appointment was the youth of Imam Jawad. Was this early age that he began at, that no one, if anyone questions us, we can demonstrate and say that the best of the time were the ones who questioned this Imam. The lifespan of the Imam breaks out into a variety of different moments where we say, for example, from 195 to 201 he is with his father, from 201 to 203 he is alone in the city of Medina. After that he remains in the city of Medina until about the year 211. At the age of 16 is when Ma'mun calls him to the city of Baghdad. When he is called to the city of Baghdad at the age of 16 is when he is married to the daughter of Ma'mun, Fadl. This is also the moment in time when he comes to the court of Ma'mun, and Ma'mun announces and he says, I intend to marry my daughter to the son of Rida. The Banu Abbas became very upset about this. And they said, how could you bring back the house of Ali after we just got rid of them? And why should we agree to this marriage? Ma'mun's intention of this marriage, there are three explanations to this. One is to say that it was his cover to say that he was not responsible for the assassination of Imam Rada. That why would I assassinate the father and then marry my daughter to his son? The second of these aspects was to break up the concentration of the Shia from the city of Medina and to pull out the head of the followers of Ahlul Bayt and separate them, lest that they should take the opportunity to create an uprising in the city of Medina. The third of these aspects was that he would be able to bring the Imam into the city of Baghdad and be able to now trace and follow all of the Nawab, the appointees, and all of the Shia of the Imam would now be in front of him, and they would have to come into a place where he had complete authority and view of who was coming and going, so that the Shia could be clearly identified and the supporters of the Imam could be identified. Some have argued and presented the argument to say that, for example, Ma'mun's intention was that he would join his lineage to the lineage of Imam Ali and create unity amongst them. We say that this is mostly a political ploy to justify amongst the eyes of people, to say that, oh yes, no, we keep peace between the Banu Abbas and the Banu Fatima. that these two lineages were intended to always be together, and I hope to keep them together by proposing this marriage and continuing this marriage. This was a farce. And his true intention was of no interest for the sake of the Imam. But at the age of 16, when the Imam is presented in the courts of Baghdad and the Banu Abbas are complaining is when Ma'mun says, then let us have off these munazira so that you can see why I have chosen this one. The knowledge and the explanation of the Imam in the courts of Ma'mun is well known. The example, for example, when Yahya bin Akhtam comes and he begins a debate with the Imam that tell me what is the kafara for the one who kills an animal in the state of ihram. This is a well-known debate. The significance of this debate is sometimes misunderstood. Everybody's okay? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad. This is the bayan tarikhiyya. We haven't gone to the actual mawdu yet. We're not on the subject of our discussion. We still have more to go. You see, Baghdad was the capital, but it was not just the capital of the government, it was the capital of knowledge and learning at the time. The most elite of the knowledgeable individuals that existed in the world of Islam lived in the city of Baghdad. The Imam has many debates with many of these people. The debate with Yahya ibn Aktham is famous because Yahya, in front of all of the scholars of his time, Yahya was Qadi al-Qudat. He was the judge of judges. He was the absolute supreme authority over all of the most knowledgeable people of the time. And which is why the debate with Yahya bin Aktham becomes famous, because Qadi al-Qudat is shown to be someone who has not an iota of intellect in front of the character and the knowledge of Imam Jawad. So the extremity in discrepancy of knowledge and information that was available at that time compared to the knowledge of the Imam was demonstrated, which is why this discussion became famous, that it happened in the court and it happened with the judge of judges, the authority over authorities. There were others as well too who from their own mouth would comment and explain the status of Imam Jawad's knowledge. There's one that's known as Ibn Abi Dawood. Ibn Abi Dawood amongst the Ahl Sunnah is a great scholar, historian, narrator. He has a great status amongst them. Ibn Abi Dawood from his own mouth gives a narration and he says, I wish that I had died 20 years ago. They say, Ibn Abi Dawood, what are you saying? He says, I have been so ashamed, I wish I would have died 20 years ago. He said, what happened? He says, we were called to the courts of Ma'mun because a thief had come into the court of Ma'mun and said that I am a thief, and O Khalifatullah, na'uzubillah, O Khalifa, I want you to pass judgment on me to purify me for the sin of theft that I have committed. So now the Khalifa is commanded, he says that I know this person has come and admitted that he has stolen. And the Khalifa now has to pass judgment on this one to say, what is his punishment? So the Khalifa calls all of the jurisprudence of the time. Remember, this is a really important point within itself, that after the first three khulafa, after the event of Karbala, no Khalifa makes the statement to say that what I say is the religion of Allah. They all acknowledge that my authority does not give me the knowledge to be able to pass judgment. I need the jurist to come and teach me what to do. So one of the consequences of the waqi' of Karbala, that it showed that the Khilafat is nothing more than a kingdom, it has no divine authority. That even in that situation, the Khalifa has to call someone to figure out what the divine responsibility is. And sure enough, this is what Ma'mun does. He calls all of the jurists, including Ibn Abi Dawood. And Ma'mun, in his honor and dignity of Ibn Abi Dawood, says to Ibn Abi Dawood, what do you say? What should be the ruling upon him? Ibn Abi Dawood says, cut his hand from the wrist. Right? Because the rule is, cut the yad. فَاقْتَعُوا أَيْدِيَهُمَا السَّارِقُ وَالسَّارِقَةُ فَاقْتَعُوا أَيْدِيَهُمَا. The Quran says, a thief, if it's a man or woman, cut their hand, yad. What is the definition of yad? Ibn Abi Dawood says, the definition of yad is cut from the wrist. Khalifa says, what's your proof? He says, when Allah talks about tayammum, He says, فَتَيَمَّمُوا وَجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ. The extent of the yad upon which tayammum is done is the hand. So therefore the hand from the wrist is where it has to be cut. Ibn Abi Dawood says, another one of the ulama, another one of the jurists of the time, and said, no, the hand means cut from the elbow. They said, what is your proof? He said, if Allah has said tayammum is on the hand, then Allah has said, فَاغْسِلُوا أَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ. That when Allah talks about wudu, which happens more, is to cut the hand from the elbow, because that's where the wudu is done from, that this is the definition of yad. Ma'mun listens to all of this and he said to Imam al-Jawad, he says, and what do you say about this? Imam Jawad says, leave me be, I don't want to answer. Ma'mun says, I swear to you by Allah that you have to tell me what your opinion in this matter is. Imam Jawad replies, he says, if you swear by Allah, then I will answer you. That the cutting of the hand is from the base of the finger, from the knuckle, the 4 fingers are to be cut. That's it. Ma'mun says, okay, what is your proof? Imam Rada's son, Imam Jawad says, he says, my proof is that our holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has said that the points of sujood are 7. The forehead, the hands, the knees, and the feet. That these 7 points need to be able to touch the ground for sajda to be valid. If you were to remove the hand from the wrist, that this person would no longer be able to fulfill the requirement of sajda. And Allah has said, Al-masajidu lillah. That the places of sujood are for Allah. Therefore, if you want to invoke the punishment of Allah, the punishment of Allah cannot prevent this person from being able to worship Allah. Ibn Abi Dawood says, when Jawad alayhi salam at the age of 16, spoke like this in the court of Ma'mun, I was killed in my own pride and my own status, that what do I know when a young man like this is teaching me about the rules of Islam in a way I could not imagine. The knowledge of the Imam, that these fuqaha, these important figures, were being ashamed, embarrassed by the authority of the Imam, was a demonstration that these A'imma alayhimus salam are not like normal people. To the extent where we even have a narration from our holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The madhmoon of this riwayah is, لا تقاسنا أهل البيت مع أحد. Our Prophet said, do not compare us, the Ahlul Bayt, with anyone. You see, when we look at a normal, knowledgeable person, pick the most knowledgeable individual you can. Their knowledge is specified to a particular realm, a particular subject. They become an expert in the subject, and we say this is one of the most knowledgeable in this subject. But you take that person from that one subject and you bring them to another arena. For example, I take the best lawyer. I start asking him about chemistry. And Baba, what do I know about chemistry? You came to me for law. Ask me about law. Don't ask me about chemistry. The specialization of knowledge is that some field, when one is the most knowledgeable in a subject, that they are knowledgeable in an arena, and another arena they may be even actually more or less knowledgeable than a normal person, because they've specialized in this field. The knowledge of the Ahlul Bayt was not like this. The knowledge of the Ahlul Bayt was perfect not in one arena, but in every arena. Right? When the Prophet says, لا تقاسوا أهل بيتنا لا تقاسوا أهل البيت مع أحد, that don't compare us Ahlul Bayt to anyone, because no one has the ability to have that information or that knowledge like us. You'll never find a comparison like us. And that if you try to compare us and our knowledge to one who is specialized in an arena, that you will disrespect us in that position. Hatim Ta'i is a famous man for giving away his wealth. Hatim Ta'i may be famous as someone who had jood and karam, or generosity. But what did Hatim Ta'i know about Islam? What did Hatim Ta'i know about the universe? What did Hatim Ta'i know about mathematics? When we look at someone who has an excellent level of bravery, that they are an expert in the battlefield, what do they know about statesmanship? What do they know about humanitarian aid? What do they know about the aiding of orphans? This is why there is no one in the world who is like the Ahlul Bayt, and there is no way to compare any person to the Ahlul Bayt. Which is why the Imam is giving the instruction, don't compare, the Prophet is giving the instruction, don't compare us to anyone, because there is no equivalency. Which is why Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam was unlike anything else. They said, we never saw someone who worshipped like Ali in the night and fought like Ali in the day. These two attributes could not be matched in a person that were matched in Ali ibn Abi Talib. So the ibadat of one like Ali in the night would mean that in the day they had no energy. Because the entire night, 1,000 rakat in one night, was the habit of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And yet in the day there was no one more fierce than him in battle. And yet that ferocity in battle did not prevent him from gentleness with the orphans in the streets of Kufa. It was not like anything else. The significance of mentioning this in the case of, for example, our 9th Imam, is that our Imam is ma'soom. He's a leader of humanity at the age of 8. Don't expect your 8-year-olds to be like Imam al-Jawad. We want our children to resemble the piety, the intellect, the worship, the character of Ahlul Bayt. But a child is a child. A child needs that process of education and rearing. If we try to compare them that, oh, the Imam at the age of 8 was doing this, what are you doing? It would be very embarrassing if that child turns around and said, yes, but his father was an Imam, what about me? No, that's not our goal. Understand that when we look at the examples of the Ahlul Bayt, it gives us the direction and the qibla that we want to point our children and the lessons to. But it's not that we're going to expect our child to bear that example, because that child is not ma'soom with the intellect of a ma'soom. They need time to mature and grow, and we need to have patience with them. The most important thing with our children that we learn from these examples is that if we purify ourselves and practice with patience, we can raise great things in our families and our lineage. Which is why, for example, the generosity, understand something, the idea that our 9th Imam is Muhammad ibn Ali al-Jawad, the generous one, is an amazing attribute to be possessed in the Imam, that he is known as Jawad Ahlul Bayt, the generous one of Ahlul Bayt, the one who would give from Ahlul Bayt. The narration that explains part of the explanation of this title comes to say that after Imam Radha left the city of Medina, the companions and the close family of Imam Radha took it upon them to protect Imam Jawad. They said, he's a child. We need to protect him. People will try to take advantage of him. So one of the things that was known was that the house of Ahlul Bayt and the house of Imam Radha was a place where, for example, sustenance was given, assistance was given, help was given. And people would gather, and there were those who gathered with good intention and others who said, a child is in charge of the house, maybe we can take advantage of this opportunity. So the companions and the family took this decision that since people gather at the house, we won't let Imam Jawad go from the front of the house where these people gather. We'll take them from the side or from the back door so that he is not disturbed by these people and no one can take advantage of him. Imam Radha writes a letter, and he writes to his son Abu Ja'far. This is where we know that Imam Radha even referred to his son as Abu Ja'far. He says, oh Abu Ja'far. And Imam gives instruction of how much money to keep with him, how much money to give to each person as a minimum, that in the family there are those who will receive 50 dinars. If they come to you, 50 dinars of gold, 25 dinars of gold, and what is the assistance that needs to be given to each of these people that come to the door. And this was a demonstration of the Imam being one of Jude, of one of generosity and giving from that early age. Our instruction and lesson from this is not that, okay, our children should be giving 50 pieces of gold to anyone who comes to ask them, but rather that the instruction that the Imam is laying out is that generosity is not a signature of old age, but it is a signature of the Iman that we keep in our heart. That us, if we are the Shia, then it's our responsibility to teach our children the process of this giving. In this culture and in this time, where, for example, the culture that we live in, our cultural problem is the promotion of the individual, of the ego. Every child is taught to measure themselves in what do I get, not what do I give. Every child has this attribute that what do I have? And they go to school and they compare. I have these shoes, you have those shoes, I need to have these shoes. You have this bag, I have that bag, I need to have that bag. You wear this label, I need to wear this label. I need. And they come to us and they say, Baba, I need. I want. We have to teach our children to ask, well, what did you give? What do you give? And the appropriateness of teaching our children to give from an early age, that when they want something, that it should be associated with, well, what are you doing to give? What is your attribute of giving and sharing? What is your attribute of helping? Not to teach the child that when your needs and desires are fulfilled, then give to someone. But no, if you have a desire, the first thing you need to do is learn to give before you can ask, what do I get? This is one of the attributes of our Imam that he teaches us in this aspect of how do we promote this concept of giving and his knowingness of being one of Jude and giving. Another of the attributes of the Imam, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, is his ibadat from a young age. The Imam's ibadat, even from the age of 8 or even from the age of 5, was one of the attributes that he was known for. And there are certain aspects of the ibadat of the Imam that are known even till today, and practices that we establish. For example, there would be a nafila of the day where the Imam would recite this nafila, in which every rakat he would recite the Surah Fatiha and Surah Tawheed, Surah Ikhlas, 70 times each. And the nafila is practiced still today. The shahadat of the Imam is at the age of 25. Therefore, his inclusion of ibadat and knowing of the ibadat the Imam would perform was a demonstration of his ibadat from an early age. And one of the practices still till today is the practice of the recitation of a mustahab salat on the coming of a new moon. Today, we have mustahabbat that say at the start of the month, practice this ibadat that is taught to us by our 9th Imam. In which, in this ibadat, it's a 2 rakat salat on the night that the new moon is sighted. It's a mustahab salat to recite for the night of the new moon, qurbatan ilallah, in which in the first rakat, we recite Surah Tawheed, Surah Ikhlas 30 times. And in the second rakat, we recite Surah Qadr 30 times. And then after that, once we complete, we give charity for the start of the new month. And this practice of ibadat was established by our Imam. Now, it doesn't mean that we make our children recite the nafila of 70 times Fatiha and 70 times Ikhlas every day. No. Our goal is the same way our Prophet taught us, La tuqasuna ahlul bayt ma ahada. Don't compare us ahlul bayt to anyone. We're not expecting our child to, but we have to lay the fundamentals of ibadat in the personality of our child. That they should be involved in our prayers, they should be involved in our practices, they should be involved in our behaviors of worshipping Allah, that the best place for them to learn ibadat is at the knee of their parents. As the parents pray, the child prays. That's the intention and the practice that we have. A second point that we'll mention 2 points and then inshallah we'll finish. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali. As we mentioned, at the age of 16, the Imam was brought back to the court of Ma'mun after Ma'mun showed the authority of the Imam in terms of knowledge against all of the most knowledgeable people of his time. He said, now who is the one that has a problem with me marrying my daughter to Muhammad ibn Ali? They all refused to have any problem with it, and he insisted then that, oh, Yabna al-Rida, you have to marry my daughter. The Imam sets a condition for accepting this marriage, and he says, I will accept this marriage as long as the dowry is not greater than the dowry of Fatima Zahra salamullahi alayha. One of the examples that's set for us and taught to us is the example of the recommendation that the Ahlul Bayt practice and that we should practice, that when we marry our daughters, that the mahar of our daughters is the amount of the mahar of Sayyidah Zahra. Now, let me explain something. The mahar of Sayyidah Zahra is the equivalent of 500 dirhams of silver, which works out to 500 dirhams of silver. Each dirham is about 3 grams of silver. 1,500 grams of silver is the equivalent right now to about $1,200. When silver goes high in price, it's close to $2,000, but never more than that. Now, the instruction of this, for example, of wanting to follow the sunnah of Ahlul Bayt and set the dowry at this amount, does not imply that no girl has the right to have a dowry greater than this. That's not the instruction or the education. As a matter of fact, what it's done and typically done in the households of the followers and lovers of Ahlul Bayt, that if we set this dowry at this amount, we supplement it with gifts in addition to this amount. So for example, if the dowry is 500, the equivalent of 500 dirhams, which is about $1,200, that will be the dowry that's officially written, but then gifts and wealth are given in excess of this in appreciation of this marriage taking place. So it's not to say that, for example, that will be the dowry and no one can ever receive a dowry greater than that, but rather that in the aqd, this is the dowry, and then we gift upon that in appreciation to show the value that we are asking and the appreciation that we have for this daughter who is entering our family. It's not something anyone can force you to do, but the keeping of this tradition is in the love of following the sunnah of Ahlul Bayt. And following their example is one of the lessons that we learn from the story of our 9th Imam. The final point that I want to mention is the interest and the ability of the Imam in the defense of Islam. When we teach our children to follow the religion of Islam, part of it should be the aspect of educating them that why we are different and why our faith is important to us and why it is that we are specific in the action that we do. In this aspect, there are narrations of our Imam when he defended the religion of Islam and showed the authority of Ahlul Bayt amongst society, that he did it in an eloquent and intellectual way. It was never done with the intention of hatred to another. And this is a problem that we have, that sometimes when we want to teach our children that we're different, we teach them to hate the other. No. The example of this is given in one of the debates that took place with our 9th Imam in his youth, where one of the members of the court presents an argument, and he says that we are those who accept and say that the first Khalifa had such a status that Jibreel was sent to our Holy Prophet to say to the Holy Prophet, "Oh Holy Prophet, ask Abu Bakr if he is happy with Allah." Imam al-Jawad did not disrespect this individual. He did not hurl insults. He said, this hadith has a problem in it. If we follow the instruction of our Holy Prophet that whenever a hadith is presented to you, compare it with the Quran, and if you find it in disagreement with the Quran, then throw out this hadith. We cannot accept this hadith. They said, "Oh grandson of the Prophet, what do you mean? What is the problem with this hadith?" The Imam replies and he says, in the Quran, Allah makes the statement, "Nahnu aqrabu ilayhi min hablil warid." We are closer to him than his own jugular vein. If it is true that Allah is closer to us than our own jugular vein, then why did Allah need to ask someone if Abu Bakr is pleased with Allah? Did Allah himself not know the status with which Abu Bakr held Allah? So therefore the hadith that Allah would have to ask this person if he is happy with Allah goes against the nas of the Quran, and the Quran can never lie. Therefore this never happened that Allah sent someone to ask, because Allah knows better than anyone else what station they are held in the eyes of Allah. So the person, he goes, then okay, if this hadith is problematic, then let us ask you, then what do you say of the hadith that the example of the first and second Khalifa on this earth is like the example of Jibreel and Mikael in the heavens? Imam al-Jawad replies, this hadith too is problematic. And the person says, how can you make the statement that this hadith is problematic? And Imam al-Jawad replies, because Jibreel and Mikael never spent a day when they did not worship Allah. Those two spent most of their life not worshipping Allah before they accepted Islam. So how could you make the statement like they are like Jibreel and Mikael, who have never disobeyed Allah since the moment of their existence? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This Imam's life ends at the age of 25. There are a number of descriptions that describe his shahadat, but the one that holds the most weight says that Fadl had ghira, she had this pride that became upset, that Mu'tasim motivated her and said, "O niece of mine, you have been disrespected, that your husband has no children with you, but he has children with another wife. How can you withstand this disrespect?" Others say of other reasons, Fadl was motivated that one day when the Imam came home on a very hot day and asked for a cold drink in the city of Baghdad, that this Fadl presented to him poisoned leban, poisoned drink of milk or yogurt. They describe and say that as soon as the Imam put this drink to his mouth, the poison began to burn in his mouth. And the Imam called out, "You have done an injustice to me, you have poisoned me." In this way, Fadl, not wanting anyone to know, closed the doors of the house of the Imam, closed him within a room after he had been poisoned, Some narrations go so far as to say that Fadil, to hide the suffering of the Imam, she called singing women into the house so that the sounds of singing would drown out the voice of the Imam crying out in pain from the poison. They describe the severity of the poison was such that the Imam looked to leave the room to a sahan, that maybe the coolness of the air would provide him some relief from the burning of the poison in his body. In this process, one of the narrators points and says that the Imam made his way to the roof of the house, where he looked for relief but could find none. When the effect of the poison became so severe, my Imam lay on the ground of the roof and put his direction towards Qibla himself. As the poison became strong, they said the sweat of death overtook the brow of my Imam. I ask you, the severity of a poison we have heard in the cases of all of our A'immah, but have you ever heard of a 25-year-old man who was so affected by the poison in his body that his youth was overcome, that he looked for relief and could find none, until eventually the sweat of death overtook his brow, his breathing became shallow, his hands began to open and close, and the soul of my Imam left his body. They said that the Imam's body lay on that roof under the sun for a period of 3 days, that Fadil would not announce to anyone the Imam was missing, until people eventually saw that the birds, when they fly over the house of the Imam, they close their wings and others land on the roof and do not move, that they became curious what is on the roof, that after a period of 3 days they discovered the body of the Imam had been left under the open sun. They gathered his body and buried him. A poet, when he writes about this narration of the shahadat of this young Imam, he says, Hi Madloom, the one who was left under the sun for 3 days, when it was the birds who would bow their wings in honor of his shahadat. But oh Madloom, with your permission, there is that Madloom in Karbala who was left for 3 days. The birds were not the ones who honored him, but it was the hooves of the horses that trampled his chest. Oh Madloom, you were left for 3 days, but there was not an arrow pierced through your liver when you were left. Your body was not mixed with the sands of Karbala. Hi Hussain, there is no one like you. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. ماتم حسين.
कहते थे रो रौनकी बाबा मोहम्मद तकी, कहते थे रो रौनकी बाबा मोहम्मद तकी, हाय गज़ब हो गया बाबा मोहम्मद तकी, कहते थे रो रौनकी बाबा, कहते थे रो रौनकी बाबा मोहम्मद तकी, हाय गज़ब हो गया तकी, कैसा सफ़र ये हुआ जिससे जुदाई हुई, कैसा सफ़र ये हुआ जिससे जुदाई हुई, राही ये जन्नत हुए बाबा मोहम्मद तकी, कहते थे रो रोन तकी, कहते थे रो रौनकी बाबा मोहम्मद तकी, हाय गज़ब हो गए मोहम्मद तकी, रोवू न क्यों करबला तुमसे जुदाई हुई, रोवू न क्यों करबला तुमसे जुदाई हुई, आह में आज लुट गया बाबा मोहम्मद तकी, कहते थे रो रोन تقی کہتے تھے رو رونقی بابا محمد تقی ہائے غضب تقی کیا کروں بابا بھلا روتی ہے مادر کھری کیا کروں بابا بھلا روتی ہے مادر کھری پیٹتی ہے اپنا سر بابا محمد تقی کہتے تھے محمد تقی کہتے تھے رو رونقی بابا محمد کی ہائے غضب ہو گیا متقی جی کے کروں کیا بھلا آپ کا سایہ نہیں جی کے کروں کیا بھلا آپ کا سایہ نہیں دم میرا ہے چھوٹتا بابا محمد تقی کہتے تھے رو رونق کہتے تھے رو رونقی بابا محمد کی ہائے ماں محمد کی زہر سے مارا تمہیں فاطمہ بے چین ہوئی زہر سے مارا تمہیں فاطمہ بے چین ہوئی سوئے جینا چل بسے بابا محمد کی کہتے تھے رو رونقی کہتے تھے رو رونقی بابا محمد کی ہائے غضب ہو گیا سورۃ المرقد الفاتحہ
السلام علیکم یا رسول اللہ السلام علیکم یا علی ابن ابی طالب السلام علیکم یا فاطمۃ الزہرا سید نساء العالمین السلام علیکم حسن مجتبی السلام علیکم یا ابا عبداللہ الحسین ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ السلام علیکم یا ائمۃ المسلمین من ذریۃ الحسین علی ابن الحسین ومحمد ابن علی وجعفر ابن محمد وموسى ابن جعفر وعلي ابن موسى محمد ابن علي وعلي ابن محمد والحسن ابن علي السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب العصر والزمان السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته اللهم صل